Welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
Gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small.
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 131 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Thank you, as always, for lending me your ears today. I know you have lots of choices out there, and I really do appreciate you coming back to listen to me. But if you're a first-time listener, then super welcome to you. But if you're a long-time listener, then welcome back to another really great episode. I can't wait to dig in this one with you. In fact, I had another episode all teed up to do today, or scheduled for today, but this subject has just been on my mind. So I'm like, right, I need to talk about this today. So I swapped it out. I'm, of course, the host, Jen, and it's my job via this podcast and social media and pretty much everywhere else I hang out to make your business life simpler. If you want to make your business life a little bit simpler, other than listening to this podcast, come and join the Like-Minded Business Owners group on Facebook. I'd love to see you in there. You can just, of course, go to Facebook and search Like-Minded Business Owners and click join. Or, of course, you can come to the show notes, which are at socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/131, and the link to Like-Minded Business Owners will be in there. But let's get into this week's episode. Like I said, this has been something that's just been playing on my mind for about 48 hours now, so I just had to get it out in a podcast episode. So let's get into it. What's the number one thing you need for business success? The number one thing. Just the number one thing. Okay, so maybe if I use an example, it might help you as well. Let's talk about restaurants. Opening a restaurant. What's the number one thing you need when you open a new restaurant? Telepathically scream it at me. Shout it out to me. What's the number one thing you think a restaurateur needs when they open up their new restaurant? I promise it's not marketing this time. So perhaps you've shouted out to me things like a great menu, a point of difference, an amazing chef, great customer service, maybe a business plan, a marketing plan, a great location, fresh food, set yourself apart from your competitors, good prices, low prices. How am I going here? Did you say any of those when I asked you what's the number one thing a restaurant needs to be successful? Well, if you did, absolutely, restaurants need all those things to be successful. But the number one thing they need to be successful is a starving crowd. They can have the best location, the best food, the best chef, the best plan, all of that. But if they don't have a starving crowd, then they simply can't sell anything. I think the whole starving crowd story has been told to me quite a few times. I think Gary Halbert actually wrote a letter about the starving crowd quite some time ago. He was a direct marketing type guru. And so it's a little story from way back, but it makes so much marketing sense. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about your starving crowd. I know I talk about marketing a lot on my Small Business Made Simple podcast. It's my jam. I love marketing. I live, breathe, talk marketing all the time. But before you can market, you need to find your starving crowd. After all, there's no point in having a product that no one wants, right? Of course. No, we need to be able to sell. We are in business to sell our product. So how do you find your starving crowd? Regardless of whether you're starting out or just about to launch a new product, or maybe you've been in business for a while and you're just wanting some growth. So here's some tips about finding your starving crowd. We need to think like them. That's my first tip. You need to think like them. We need to talk and we need to write like them. Perhaps we could go and, think about what would they type into a Google search. If they were searching for what you have to sell them, what would they actually type into a Google search? Write down as many phrases as you can think of what they might type into Google. Of course, we're looking for the language of our buyer here. We should be talking always in the language of our buyer. So we're looking to use these types of phrases and keywords in our marketing copy, in our blog writing copy, in our show notes that we might do, or of course for your SEO in your website. So we need to start to think like them, talk like them, and write like them. We need to know what's the language of our buyer. If we can talk in the language of our buyer, we are more likely to attract our starving crowd. Another little tip that was given to me a little while ago, which I thought was really cool, was you could go to Amazon and you could look for books that are on the topic of whatever your niche is. And you could look at the reviews and start to sort of see some patterns in the reviews. Maybe start writing down the 10 most common complaints disappointed people have. What are those threads that keep coming up that, they are keywords of people that are your starving crowd that they keep using? Can you do something similar on Facebook, especially in Facebook groups? Keywords, start searching for keywords around your niche and read the threads. Look for the common problems, look for the common roadblocks and the grievances people have. These are the problems you should be solving with whatever it is that you sell, because it's your niche and you want to help these people, but you need to think and write in the language of your buyer. So going to Amazon and having a look at books that are in your niche and having a look at some of the reviews are really good. Someone told me once to always look at the reviews that are around 3 stars. Don't look at the 1 stars. They're just whingers. You don't want them to be your ideal client. If they're whinging on a review on Amazon, you don't want those people anyway. The 5-star people, well, they're just, blowing smoke. So you want the 3-star people. You want to start looking at 3-star people and see what they have to say, because they're not totally unhappy, but they're not totally happy. And they're the people that you want in your world. Of course, the third option of finding a little bit more about your starving crowd and where they might be hanging out is to look at your social media insights. Your Facebook and your Instagram insights tell you who is hungry for the product or service that you sell. You can go back and listen to episode 120, which was all about your insights and your analytics that you can and how to use them to help grow your business. Of course, you can find episode 20 in your favorite podcast app, or go to socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/120 for 120. But these will tell you who is hungry for your product or service, and it's free and it's tailored to your business and to you and to what you sell. It's like this little tiny piece of free gold that social media gives you. If you go to Amazon or if you go to Facebook groups, you are looking overall at ideal clients or starving crowds that you're trying to attract. But the ones that are interacting with your social media, that's actually tailored to you and your business, and you can see if they're interacting with what you sell. Of course, the best thing about a starving crowd is that they are less price sensitive, and they're the people we want inside our business. We don't want people who are looking for a bargain necessarily. We don't want people who are price comparing us to our competition and things like that. So starving crowds are often less price sensitive. They are starving for what you have. They don't care so much about the price. They just care that you are going to solve their challenge or their problem. They are starving for what you have. But of course, the other thing to remember about starving crowds is once they've eaten, they're no longer starving. So, which in business terms translates to the fact that if you always need to be looking at what your starving audience wants. You need to think, what's next for them? What are their new challenges? What are their new roadblocks? Because you've solved it. They've already eaten with you. You've solved one part of their puzzle. So what's the next thing that you need to be looking at to solve? Your business needs to always be evolving. Or, of course, you are attracting a new starving crowd, depending on your business model. But if you're looking at, what's next for them, what's their new challenge, what's their roadblock that you can help fix, for example, sell a product or service to alleviate that problem or challenge or roadblock. So what's the next thing once they've eaten, once you've cured their starvation once, how can you do it continually? Learning as much as you can about your ideal client is really a fundamental piece of the puzzle when it comes to business success. I've always had a mentor in my business journey. My first ever talked a lot about ideal client and ideal audience and ideal client avatar. I talk about who is your who, but he talked about this at least a dozen times before I started to take any notice of what he was crowing about. And then it took probably another couple of times before I really started to see the genius in the research and the fundamentals of getting to know my ideal client. And remember, back in these days, with this particular mentor, for a start, I was in retail. So finding a retail ideal client, I always thought was a lot harder to do than to find someone in a service-based business. So it took me a long time to harness or to see the power of harnessing this whole concept of getting to know your ideal audience. So of course, at the moment we're talking about, starving crowds, getting to know these starving crowds, but listening and reading and researching my ideal client and hanging out where they hang out and seeing the words they use, the phrases they type, really helps me curate my content and my offerings. And it really helps me develop my language. So I know that I'm talking to them, but more importantly, they know I'm talking to them. They read something and they've got the head nod test. They're like, Jen's talking to me. That is my problem. How am I going to solve it? Oh, look over there. She has a solution. That's because I'm talking in the language of my buyer. And it's no mistake that I hit this nail on the head, or I poke that frustration, or I delight the senses of my ideal client so that they move a little bit closer to that buying decision. Of course, we know not everyone buys the first time they come across you, even if you do have the solution to their problem. I don't know what the stat is these days. Social media and digital marketing just make the stats so much bigger, but it used to be about 12 touch points. So, someone has to interact with your brand and with you around 12 times before they are ready to buy. So if you think about that, you can think about how much you need to get to know this starving crowd and how you need to always be thinking about the language of the buyer. Remember, business is never about you. It's always about your buyer. Even when you're telling your story and about your journey, you are still doing it so that your audience can get to know, like, and trust you. So your audience can have a head nod test of, yes, she understands me, she's been there before me. So it's, even though it's your story and you're telling the story and it's about you, it's still really about your customer and moving them closer to that buying decision. So if you take nothing else from today's chat, I'm hoping that you'll think about your offerings. Think about the offerings that you have now, the services that you sell or the products that you sell, and are they really what your audience wants, or are they just what you want to sell? Remember, this is about them. It's not about you. Or vice versa. Does your audience need something different that you're not willing to sell to them? Let's look at a couple of examples. You might have a brilliant online course all about taking photos with your iPhone, taking beautiful photos of products with your iPhone. So that's an online course that you've got offering. But your audience, all they want is a photographer to do it for them. They want they don't want the DIY. They want it done for them. So they're not your buyer. If you are attracting these people, they're not your buyer. They're never going to buy from you. You're not solving their problem or their challenge. Or your audience is desperately seeking a solution to buying products as rewards for their staff members, and they need gift baskets, but you only sell the wine. So they're not your buyer. If they want gift baskets and you sell wine, then unless they are prepared to gather all the things themselves and make the gift baskets themselves, then they're not your ideal client. They're not going to necessarily buy from you. You aren't attracting your own starving crowd. And you know they don't want courses or wines because you see them talking about their problems and their challenges online all the time. You did the research, you looked at the data, you know you're not attracting the people who are actually your own starving crowd. You're attracting someone else's starving crowd. So does that mean you need to become a photographer or start selling gift baskets? No, not at all. Heck no. Unless, of course, you wanted to collaborate with someone else and, service the starving crowd that way. But it does mean you're attracting the wrong people. It does mean you're attracting the wrong audience for what you sell. You haven't found your starving audience yet. You're finding someone else's starving audience. So you need to go back to the drawing board and start doing some research. All right, so finally, let's do this. Let's do some research, get to know your starving crowd, look at your offerings and make sure you are using the language of your buyer in your marketing copy and in your offerings, and that your offerings are actually solving the problems, the roadblocks, the challenges for your buyer. Make sure you are attracting the people who will one day do business with you. They will pull out their hard-earned cash and do business with you. Because at the end of the day, we are here to make money. We are in business to make money. Yes, it might be a hobby. Yes, it might be a passion of yours. But unless you make some money, you can't afford to keep going in business. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and it's helped you think a little bit differently about your marketing. If you're completely stuck and you feel like your challenges are just a little bit too much at this point, I'd really invite you to come and have a bit of a discovery call with me and we can chat all about your goals and your struggles and your roadblocks, what's holding you back, and maybe even how I can help with that. You can go to my calendar and book an appointment for a discovery call. The link is in the show notes at socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/131. Or of course, if you've got a pen and paper now, you can just go to calendly.com, so calendly.com/gen-smm/discovery. So it's probably easier if you go to the show notes. Or you know what? If you go to my Instagram at @JenDonovan_, you will find that link in the bio as well. But that's it. That's it for episode 131. I will be back next Thursday with this week's episode that I put off to next week because I really wanted to talk to you about your starving audience and get you enthused. And, last week it was all about your mid-year check-in. So this one hopefully will give you the gusto to go, who's my starving audience? Where are they? And why won't they buy my product? I am going to solve this solution before the end of 2021. I hope you're enjoying this podcast. I hope you get something out of it every single week that you turn up to have a listen to me. Make sure you've clicked subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and maybe even share this one with another superstar business owner who's doing that daily grind, who would really appreciate someone making their business life a little bit simpler, or someone who might need to find their own starving crowd. If you have a chance to leave a rating and a review, bless you. I would be so appreciative of that. It takes a lot to do a podcast every single week, but I really do appreciate people who reach out on Instagram DMs and send me emails and leave rating and reviews. It's always so great to hear from my listeners. So massive love coming your way if you manage to make time for a rating and a review. Like I said, I will see you next week on the podcast for episode 132. But whatever you do, remember, my small business peeps, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.